What does meditation have to do with fitness and success? Well, today we're going to explore meditation, and not at all the kind that you're used to hearing about.
Welcome to Thriving Launch with Louise Congdon and Kamala Chambers, this show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business.
Do you have a product or service that you would like to sell online? Or maybe you've been thinking about it, but you're reserved to do it because you need a website, you need complicated systems, and you need to spend money? Well, I've created a completely free course that teaches you how to use Facebook in a purely organic way. This means no ads and no money are needed. You can use Facebook completely free. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com. Opt into my Profit from Social Media course. I'm going to teach you the free methods to using Facebook to make money today. Today's guest is Elliot Hulse. He's attracted over 1 million subscribers, was named the #1 YouTube fans favorite by Ryan Seacrest. I'm sure you've probably seen his videos if you're into fitness and health. Elliot Hulse is going to bring us a really different slant on health and fitness through meditation in the most dynamic way you've ever heard of it. All right, here we are with Elliot Hulse. Elliot, I've been watching your videos for a while. You've been on YouTube. That's where I found you. You're this super fit guy, and I'm excited to dive in with you on the Thriving Launch show. Are you ready to launch?
I'm ready to launch.
Awesome. So, one of the things that you talk a lot about is fitness and health, and people look at you and they think of strength camp. And yet there's this other aspect of health and fitness that is not often talked about, and that's meditation and mindfulness. And I'd love to talk to you about that because I know that's something that's really important to you.
Well, one of the things I like to say is that the body is the mind. My first experience with how the body holds onto our psychological experiences is when I began with dynamic meditation over a decade ago. And I had been studying the work of Osho as it related to meditation. Now, mind you, at the time, I'm a fitness coach, and I'm just looking into meditation for my own personal growth. I was going through a rough time. And Osho's position on meditation is that we are to still the body in order that the mind may be still. And you know when people aren't still because you can watch them grind their teeth or tap their foot, or just be fidgety, not being able to sit still, stand still, or even be in silence is a challenge. And it made sense to me. I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder when I was a kid, and I don't like to be still physically. And when Osho described his meditation, the dynamic meditation, as a way to get in touch with the movement in our body, most of it is unconscious, so getting in touch with it is the first part. Releasing it and then allowing energy to circulate and settle in the body in order to find stillness. I knew that it was something for me. Being an athlete, I've always been drawn to things that are very active. So these dynamic or active meditations made a lot of sense to me, and I went to New York City. At the time, I was living in Long Island. I went to a workshop where we did 21 days of dynamic meditation. And I know you guys are familiar with it, but for those who are listening, it is a very physical exercise. It's a meditation that requires that we charge the body with breath, building the energy in the body. Almost like when you're running and sprinting, you're charging the body with breath, but the type of charging that's associated with the first stage of this 5-stage meditation is very different. It's very nonlinear, and it causes you to have to move a lot.
I remember not being able to speak for a few days. I lost my voice the first couple of times I did dynamic meditation because you're not just moving your body, you're moving everything. You're using your voice, you're you're yelling. And I think it's, for me, those principles of movement, to move all of that energy that's stuck in the body, move it through, and you do get to that place of stillness.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the idea, is to do as you say, is to find stillness through the exact opposite, right? I mean, we know things by their contrast. When we get very enrolled in movement, especially chaotic nonlinear movement, we can find we can springboard to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is the stillness that we're really after.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful way. For me, I've done different types of meditation. You know, I've sat for 10 days in a Vipassana retreat in silence and stillness. And for me, there, you know, the other side of the spectrum of that is more of the dynamic meditation, where you're running in place at full speed, or you're screaming "fuck you" at someone, you know, which is part of the dynamic meditation, and you know, things like that. So I'd love to hear just a little bit more from you about how that attributes to your fitness, the finding that stillness. How does that attribute to you being a fit, healthy, happier person?
Well, active meditation led me to bioenergetics. And bioenergetics comes from Alexander Lowen, who was a student of Wilhelm Reich. Are you guys familiar with Wilhelm Reich?
Yeah, really great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is what I spent the past several years studying and working with alongside building my fitness business and working on myself. Wilhelm Reich, who was a student of Freud, was a psychoanalyst, just like Freud. He would work with the psychological issues that his clients had, but he began to notice something very different when he was working through the psychological, pulling up like the old experiences and speaking to his clients, than what some of the other therapists was recognizing. And what he began to notice is that the person's body, particularly their breath, would begin to change depending on what experiences they were recalling. For example, if someone began to speak of a particular abuse or fear or anxiety that they've had, their breathing would become shallow, and the way they would hold their body changed. And so he started putting two and two together. He started realizing that, well, perhaps there's something going on in the body that's related to what's happening in this person's mind and their emotions. And what he decided to do was to, instead of standing or sitting behind his client and listening to them talk while they were laying on the bed or the couch, he brought himself around to the front of them where he could watch them, watch their body, watch the way they breathe, in order to get a better look at what is actually happening with the individual. And his therapy moved from just working with talk approaches to actually supporting the person in how they breathe, and bringing their conscious awareness to how they were holding their body. He went so far as to recognize patterns in how people would hold their body and how that would translate into their posture. And this is where me as a fitness coach began to explore why is it that some of my clients can't improve their posture? Why do they always seem to have certain physical pains and ailments? Why do some people have very low charge? They can't breathe heavily. Why are some people ungrounded in their breathing? It always seems like they're chaotic. So working with fitness clients and looking at their bodies and knowing about Wilhelm Reich's work and character structure, I began to really pay close attention to how people's postures, their physical strength, their physical health, their neuromuscular system was being, say, manipulated by what was going on in their mind.
You know, one thing that one of my students said when I was teaching energy medicine many years ago is, they said, where the breath goes, energy flows. And this is something that, we were already talking about, but I love how they put it together like that, because it's such an important thing that if we're just breathing really shallow and we're constricted or our body is kind of slouched over, like you were talking about how the mind shapes the body. If you're depressed, then your shoulders are rounded forward, you're breathing shallow, and then there's no life force moving through the rest of you. Luis, do you have a question or something that you wanted to go into about that?
No, that just really reminded me of the book Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goldman, where he talked about people who had repeated heart attacks and some research that they did with groups of people that, because the heart attacks were in their family and then they had had heart attacks, statistically they were going to have more. And they started practicing just some breathing techniques with these people, and none of them had more heart attacks from that group. And one of the things that the doctor who was leading that study said is that right now in medicine, around 80-90% or something like that of illnesses can be attributed to stress. And if you could just teach people how to breathe properly, we could help them get rid of their ailments. How has your success been with that and helping people change their breathing and getting them to do more moments of, like, silent meditation, active meditation, and breathing? Has that helped you see improvements in fitness and people just feeling happier in general as well?
Yeah, well, once again, the body is the mind. And I began realizing that my fitness routines were changing people, not only changing their bodies, but changing their characters. Back when I worked with high school and college football players in the very beginning of my career, a skinny young man who was kind of underdeveloped and awkward comes into my gym. And then 4 months later, he's walking out with a swagger, and all of a sudden his grades are better and he's got more friends and girls are recognizing him. At that point, I realized that what we're doing as fitness coaches goes far beyond just what is on the surface. We're really changing people's character and we're changing their lives.
That's so cool to hear that. And it's, for me, it's proof too, because in my previous work where I worked with married couples and singles as well, looking to have love, one of the things that I did often with them, where if it was a couple, I would have them just eye gaze and breathe together, and that created the synchronicity. And with singles, one of the things that we did when we were working on just confidence is learning how to breathe differently so that their body would shift. I kind of want to take this other shift in our conversation too, because I've been reading your blog articles and emails recently, and one of the things I've noticed about you, and I didn't know it so much because I watched a lot of your old videos, Elliot, but one of the things that I've noticed is you're really kind of bringing out the part of you that's into spirituality and yoga and some of those belief systems that you have around that. I'm curious, how has that response been for you, being a little bit more outspoken about some of that, those different aspects of yourself?
Well, good marketing is divisive anyway. One of the first things I learned as a marketer, putting everything else aside, my mission in life and my vision for the world, as a student of marketing, particularly of direct response marketing, I was a student of Dan Kennedy's. It's very helpful to have firm stances on particular topics, even if it causes people to be turned away from you. In fact, just as many people are turned away from you, and the intensity by which they're turned away from you is mirrored by the exact opposite. And, the firmer I have become in who I am and expressing who I am, the stronger my relationship to the right fans, my right customers and clients,
That's really cool. And have you noticed that as you're bringing in yoga and mindfulness and meditation into your work, I'm just thinking about, like, when I go to the gym and I work out with people, especially when I work out with people that are very muscular and very fit, most of them aren't into yoga and fitness. And so that's one of the things that I found very interesting, is that you've started bringing that in, which I've been very grateful for, to see that, because in the world of bodybuilding and fitness, you don't see that being coupled up very much.
Early in my career, I became a student of Paul Chek. I don't know if you're familiar with Paul, but Paul was a holistic health. He is a holistic health practitioner who, in the 1990s, began teaching various forms of what you would call holistic health to personal trainers. And I became very fascinated with that when I was still in college. I was still a student. I was still learning. I was not a professional yet. But that coupled with my thirst for inner knowing and God gave me a particular mission that I haven't really shared with many people. When I went into the fitness industry, it was my intention to bring holistic health and meditation to the average meathead. That was my private mission, and I said I'm going to bring these expansive ideas to what is kind of a rigid marketplace. And although it looked as if I was one way. I mean, like you said, if you watch some of my videos or you see the way I'm behaving or the words I'm using, the way I'm being, I'm trying to appeal to a large audience. That was my intention. My intention is to have millions of followers. But in a way, I kind of I don't want to say I did a bait and switch because I always had this holistic approach. That's why my videos became popular. But at some point, I decided, okay, now is the time that I got to separate the wheat from the chaff. And if you're not willing to go there with me, then that's okay. I'm really looking for those who not only want bigger, stronger bodies, right? Because that's just part of the equation, but want to be what I call the strongest version of themselves. And that's a holistic approach.
It's something that is really the marker of success for most people, that when they're putting themselves out there in an online environment, if they can differentiate themselves from everyone else and be full out who they are, it really makes a difference. And I'd love to hear from you just a few more tips back to the meditation and the fitness aspect. What if you could give one tip to the thriving launchers? What would it be to be healthier, happier humans?
Well, I think we alluded to it earlier. When you ask people what success is, and you trace it back to, well, I have a big house and I have a nice car, and why? So that I could have a wife. Why? So that I can have someone to enjoy my life with, so on and so forth. And you get down to the root of it is so that they can be happy. And happiness is being the root, being the etiology, being what it is that we're really after. We find that that's available to us if we choose to be still and be grateful, which comes from stillness and observation, with even the most simple things in life. But that's not available if we're anxious. That's not available if we're riddled with all kind of muscular imbalances that don't allow us to breathe softly. We could be happy just standing in the sun, but most people aren't available when the sun's beating down on them or warming them. That's a better way to put it, because they're distracted. They're elsewhere. We're almost like schizoid, our minds are somewhere else, and the present slips by, and happiness slips away with it.
That's really nice, and I completely agree with that. As you were speaking about just the possibility of being happy in the moment with what's simply there, to me that felt really great. It also reminded me of the work of Eckhart Tolle, where he had his kind of breakthrough, I guess, and he just lived on a bench for several months and didn't really need a whole lot else. And that's a lot of what we're talking about, is the possibility of finding happiness and joy right where you're at. And one of the simple ways we can do that is through finding simple moments of stillness. Elliot, it's been a real pleasure to have you here on the show. I, as somebody who's been into fitness and at one point wanted to just get really huge, and found your videos, and I just found I wanted to share with you. I have a lot of gratitude for the work that you're doing. I'm very appreciative of the fact that now you're coming out more fully and giving us an opportunity to touch base with other aspects of wellness and the whole being. For us, it's been a real honor to have you on the Thriving Launch, because that's what Kamala and I are here to do.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
We've been here with Elliot. It's been so fantastic to have you guys tuning in to Thriving Launch, and we have some fantastic YouTube videos, and ways to connect with Elliot, as always, at thrivinglaunch.com. You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.
And be sure to tune in tomorrow, where we're going to talk to Mark Schultz about the true story behind the hit movie Foxcatcher that starred Channing Tatum and Mark Ruffalo.